Welcome back to Teach Me the Bible Stories with Miss Michelle. Today we'll look at 2 Kings 4 and 5, where God continues to do amazing miracles through the prophet Elisha, including raising a boy from the dead and healing Naaman's leprosy. There'll be 10 questions at the end. You can earn 100 points. But first, the books of the Bible. The Old Testament has 5 books of law: Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. 12 books of history: Joshua, Judges, Ruth, 1st and 2nd Samuel, 1st and 2nd Kings, 1st and 2nd Chronicles, Ezra, Nehemiah, Esther. 5 books of wisdom: Job, Psalms, Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, Song of Songs. 5 books of major prophets: Isaiah, Jeremiah, Lamentations, Ezekiel, Daniel. 12 books of minor prophets: Hosea, Joel, Amos, Obadiah, Jonah, Micah, Nahum, Habakkuk, Zephaniah, Haggai, Zechariah. And now we're ready to learn our last book of minor prophets and our last book of the whole Old Testament, which is Malachi. Now we're using the word for future because Malachi tells of a future messenger who will come and restore God's people and heal their hard hearts. We will learn more about Malachi in our next lesson. Okay, are you ready for today's Bible story? Listen carefully. This story is from the Bible, God's holy word. A wealthy lady in the city of Shunem welcomed the prophet Elisha into her home and fed him when he came into town. One day she said to her husband, "I know Elisha is a holy man of God. So let's make a small room on the roof and put some furniture in it so that Elisha can stay with us when he comes into town." Her husband agreed, and a room was built for Elisha. One day, while Elisha was in his room, he decided he wanted to do something nice for this Shunammite woman. So Elisha asked his hired worker, Gehazi, for a suggestion of what would be a nice thing to do for her. And Gehazi said, "She does not have a son, and her husband is already old." So Elisha agreed that a son was exactly what she needed. So Elisha told the Shunammite woman, "This time next year you will hold a son in your arms." And she said, "No, please don't trick me." But it happened just as Elisha said. The next year she gave birth to a son. Okay, the Shunammite woman and her husband showed great hospitality to Elisha. What did they prepare for him in their home? A room for him to stay in. And Elisha wanted to do something nice in return. What did Elisha's servant Gehazi say she needed? A son. And what did Elisha tell the Shunammite woman that she would hold in her arms about this time next year? A son. Well, the child grew, and one day he complained to his father that his head was hurting terribly. He was rushed home, and later that day the boy died in his mother's arms. The Shunammite woman laid her dead son on Elisha's bed. Then she searched for Elisha. She finally found him on Mount Carmel, and she grabbed Elisha's feet and asked, "Did I ask you for a son? Didn't I tell you don't trick me?" And when Elisha arrived, he shut the door behind him and he prayed with Gehazi. And Elisha then laid on the boy, mouth to mouth, eyes to eyes, hands to hands. And the boy's body grew warm. Elisha then stood up and he walked back and forth before he stretched himself over the boy again. And this time, as Elisha laid over the boy sneezed. He sneezed 7 times, and then he opened his eyes. The boy who had been dead was now alive again. Okay, the son of the Shunammite woman complained to his father that what was hurting him terribly? his head. And later that day, what happened to the boy as he laid in his mother's arms? He died. And where did the mother lay her dead son's body? On Elisha's bed. And the Shunammite woman searched for Elisha. Where did she find him? Mount what? Mount Carmel. And what happened to the boy's body that first time that Elisha laid across the boy? His body grew warm. And what happened when Elisha stretched himself over the boy that second time? The boy sneezed 7 times and then opened his eyes. He came back to life. Well, Elisha did other miracles too. In fact, he did so many miracles that word spread about him even outside of Israel. You see, a young Israelite girl was captured by the Arameans and was forced to be a slave for Naaman's wife. Naaman was the commander of the Aramean army. But Naaman developed a terrible disease called leprosy. Leprosy is painful. But the worst part about leprosy is that it's contagious. So people with leprosy had to live isolated from other people. Well, this Israelite slave girl was concerned for Naaman. So she told her mistress that there was a prophet in Israel who could do miracles and who could cure Naaman of his leprosy. She was talking about the prophet Elisha. Okay, so why was the Israelite girl living in Aram? She had been captured and taken there. And the Israelite girl worked for Naaman's wife. What disease did Naaman have? Leprosy. And who told Naaman's wife about the miracle-working prophet Elisha? This Israelite slave girl. And when Naaman heard this news, he asked the king of Aram if he could go to Israel. The king of Aram said, of course, and then offered to write a letter to the king of Israel asking the king of Israel to cure Naaman of his leprosy. Well, Naaman left, taking with him lots of silver and gold and nice clothes so that he could pay someone to heal him. And when the king of Israel received the letter from the king of Aram, the king of Israel tore his clothes and said, "Am I God? How can I cure a man of leprosy?" The king tore his clothes to show how upset he was. He felt like the king of Aram was trying to start a war with him because, of course, he did not have the power to heal leprosy. But then Elisha heard what had happened. So Elisha sent a message to the king of Israel telling him to send Naaman to his home. So Naaman showed up at Elisha's door. But Elisha didn't go meet him. Instead, Elisha sent a message to Naaman telling him to go wash 7 times in the Jordan River. Elisha said that after he washes 7 times in the Jordan River, that Naaman's skin will be healed. Okay, the king of Aram wrote a letter to the king of Israel. In that letter, the king of Aram asked who to heal Naaman? He asked the king of Israel to heal Naaman. And what all did Naaman take with him as he traveled to Israel? A reward of lots of silver, gold, and nice clothes. And when the king of Israel read that letter, what did he do to show how upset he was? He tore his clothes. And when Elisha heard what had happened, he told the king of Israel to send Naaman where? To Elisha's house. When Naaman came to Elisha's door, did Elisha talk directly to Naaman? No, he sent a message through someone else. And what was that message? What river was Naaman told to go to? The Jordan River. And how many times was Naaman told to wash in the Jordan River before he would be healed? 7 times. Okay. When Naaman heard that, he went away angry and said the prophet didn't even come out. He didn't even come out and pray to his God or wave his hand over me. Naaman was angry because Elisha didn't do what Naaman thought he would do. And Elisha's instructions sounded ridiculous to him. Naaman asked, "Couldn't I have just washed in the rivers in Aram and be healed?" Naaman was so angry that he stormed off, heading back to Aram. Well, Naaman's servants chased after him and said, "If the prophet had told you to do something great, you would have done it. Why not try this?" Well, Naaman listened to his servants and reluctantly traveled to the Jordan River. And there in the Jordan, Naaman dipped down in the water 7 times, just as Elisha had instructed him. And after that 7th time, Naaman came up out of the water, and Naaman's leprosy was miraculously gone. He was healed. Okay, so why was Naaman so angry? Elisha didn't do what he thought he would do. And Elisha's instructions sounded ridiculous to Naaman. And who talked Naaman into giving Elisha's instructions a try? Naaman's servants. And what happened to Naaman's leprosy after that 7th time of dipping into the Jordan River? It was gone. It was a miracle. He was healed. Well, Naaman and his servants then went back to Elisha and said, "Now I know there is no God in all the world except in Israel." Naaman then tried to give that great reward of lots of silver, gold, and nice clothes to Elisha. But Elisha refused. Elisha refused to receive anything. Naaman left healed and happy because he now knew who the true God is. Naaman decided to only worship the God of Israel from then on. Okay, so what did Naaman say to Elisha? "Now I know there is no God in all the world except where? In Israel." And did Elisha receive Naaman's reward of lots of silver, gold, and nice clothes? No, he refused the reward. Well, after Naaman had traveled some distance, Elisha's servant Gehazi chased after Naaman. And Gehazi lied to Naaman and told him that Elisha sent him. But Elisha did not send him. Gehazi lied and said 2 unexpected visitors came right after Naaman left. And actually, some of that silver and 2 sets of clothes would be very helpful to provide for the unexpected visitors. Well, Naaman said, "By all means," and gave him silver and 2 sets of clothes. Well, after Gehazi put those things away in his own house, he thought he had gotten away with the sin of lying and stealing the reward. But then Elisha asked Gehazi, "Where have you been?" And Gehazi said, "Nowhere." But Elisha knew exactly what Gehazi had done because the Lord revealed it to Elisha. Elisha said, "Naaman's leprosy will now cling to you and your descendants forever." And immediately Gehazi developed that terrible skin disease of leprosy, and his skin turned white as snow. Okay, Gehazi lied to Naaman in order to get some of that reward. What was the consequence for Gehazi's sin? Gehazi developed leprosy. Well, Gehazi should have known that you can't trick God. God sees everything. Today we looked at 2 stories. The story of the son of the Shunammite woman coming back to life, and the story of Naaman being healed of leprosy. In both of these stories, we see that God acted in ways that was very surprising to people. The Shunammite woman was definitely surprised that she could have a son in her old age. She had obviously given up hope that it was even possible. But then, when her son died, she did not understand why God would bless her with a son and then take him away. She had no idea that God had a bigger plan in store. God was ready to show her and others just how powerful he is. God's power in Elisha was able to raise her son from the dead. Then God surprised Naaman. Naaman thought leprosy was incurable, and then he heard that there was someone in Israel who had God's power to heal. But when Naaman received instructions to do something so simple like dipping down in the Jordan River 7 times, Naaman thought there was no way that would work. But thankfully, Naaman's servants talked him into doing it anyway. Naaman was so surprised when he came up after that 7th time and his skin was healed. Naaman then knew who the one true God is. So often we think we know how God will work and how God should work. God says in Isaiah 55, 8 and 9, "For my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways, declares the Lord. As the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts." God is letting us know that He is God, and we are not. God often does things that we will not understand, but we must trust that God always knows best. We only see a tiny little bit of what's going on. God sees the big picture. So when you don't understand what God is doing, you can pray Isaiah 55, 9 and say, "Thank you, Lord, that your ways are so much higher than my ways, and your thoughts, oh Lord, are so much better than my thoughts." Trust the Lord. He always knows what He's doing. And obey His instructions even when they don't make sense to you. Naaman did not understand how dipping 7 times in the Jordan River would help. And sometimes we may not fully understand God's commands for us in the Bible, but we need to humble ourselves and obey the Lord God anyway. Okay, are you ready for your 10 questions? Just hit the pause button if you need a little bit more time after each question. Question 1. The Shunammite woman and her husband prepared a room for Elisha to stay in. Elisha then wanted to do something nice for her. What did Elisha's servant Gehazi say she needed? Time, a son. Question 2. The son of the Shunammite woman complained to his father that his head was hurting him terribly. Later that day, what happened to the boy as he laid in his mother's arms? Time, the boy died. Question 3. Where did the Shunammite woman lay her dead son's body? Where did she lay him? Time, on Elisha's bed. Question 4. The first time Elisha laid across the boy's body grew warm. What happened when Elisha stretched himself over the boy the second time? Time, he came back to life, or you could say more specifically, he sneezed 7 times and opened his eyes. Okay, question 5. Naaman was the commander of Aram's army. What disease did Naaman develop? Time, leprosy. Number 6. Who told Naaman's wife about the miracle-working prophet Elisha? We don't know her name, but who was she? Time, that Israelite slave girl. Number 7. Elisha sent a message to Naaman. What river was Naaman told to go to? Time, the Jordan River. Number 8. How many times was Naaman told to wash in the Jordan River before he would be healed? How many times? Time, 7 times. Question 9. What happened to Naaman's leprosy after that 7th time of dipping in the Jordan River? Time, it was gone. He was healed. Last question, question 10. Elisha did not receive Naaman's reward. But then Gehazi lied to Naaman to get some of that reward. What was the consequence for Gehazi's sin? Time, Gehazi developed leprosy. Okay, how many did you get right? Now multiply that by 10 and that's your score. Now I have 2 assignments for you. I want you to go read 2 Kings 4 and 5. Then go tell someone what you learned today. Come back for our next video in our Teach Me the Bible Story series. See you next time.